Thanks for joining me at 6:30. I'm Rick Marinon. We're dedicating extra time tonight to bring you an interview with a man who's been through 2 terrorist attacks in his life. Peter Bitwinski worked in the North Tower of the World Trade Center both in 1993 and on September 11, 2001. 23 years later, as we begin to reflect on the anniversary of one of America's darkest days, Peter tells me he still remembers everything. Peter, you were there for both attacks. Let's talk about it from the very beginning, starting in 1993.
But I finally landed a full-time job as an accountant on the 69th floor of One World Trade Center working for a public agency. It was great. I was young. I was working in the greatest city in the world, New York City, and at the time, the tallest and most famous building in the world. So for me, it was really a beautiful experience and a great place to work with an awesome view. I commuted to New York City, and when I arrived at the building, I needed to take 2 escalators and 2 elevators just to get to my office on the 69th floor. But I felt really privileged to have the World Trade Center as my workplace. The first 15 years were wonderful years for me, launching my career and commuting every day into New York City. The first problem thing that happened at the World Trade Center happened in 1993, which was the World Trade Center bombing. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It was kind of on a gray, snowy, late February, Friday afternoon when the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993, a little after 12:15. And when it was, the building shook. The lights went out immediately, and within 5 minutes, smoke had reached our floor on 69. We were taught to avoid the elevators and go to the staircase, which we did, except that the staircase was loaded with people. When we got into the staircase, there was a lot of heat, a lot of smoke, no lights and no announcements. I remember only getting to the 47th floor that day in 1993, and we waited on that floor for many hours. There wasn't much communication, but finally, after many hours, the firefighters made it up to our floor, and we were able to descend down the staircase. I remember exiting to the street about 6 p.m. that evening. Remember, the bomb went off at 12:18. The building, we were displaced from the building for about 6 weeks while it was cleaned and repaired. When we were set to return to the building, I remember I returned for 2 reasons. Number one was that I had a job that I struggled to get and I didn't want to lose. And number 2, I felt that the building wouldn't be attacked again. But things really returned to normal in New York and at the World Trade Center over the next 8 years until the morning of September 11th of 2001. As a worker, I used to arrive at work early, so I was at my desk at 8:15 that morning. The plane hit about a half hour later at 8:46. I was writing something at my desk. The plane hit from behind me, so I didn't see it approach. And when it hit, it knocked me onto my desk. And really, the next 1 to 2 minutes were the longest in my life. On my floor, there was no smoke or fire. What I experienced is what I heard and what I felt. What I heard was the sound of crunching steel of the building violently moving back and forth. And when I stood up, the floor was rolling, literally rolling. And I just remember thinking, that I'm going to plunge all the way down, and this is where it all ends for me. Fortunately, after about a minute or two, the building righted itself and that moving stopped. Someone ran down and said that we needed to evacuate. Another person ran down and said it was a plane that hit the building. So pretty early on, I knew what had hit the building. My coworker friend, John, though, I knew needed help. John is paralyzed, and he's in a motorized wheelchair, and the wheelchair cannot get down a staircase. So what was fortunate was after the 1993 bombing, they brought in these things called evacu chairs to help handicapped people. I ran off to get the evacu chair, and when I returned, a great thing happened. 10 of my coworker friends were there and hung around to help. So we unstrapped John from his wheelchair, lifted him into the evac chair, strapped him in there. We had two guys at the bottom of the evac chair, two at the top, and we gathered ourselves and we began going down the staircase. We would rotate after every 5 floors, bottom to top rolls off. We're moving pretty well down the staircase. We were slower, so we allowed people to our left to move beyond us. But we're moving pretty well until we reached the floors in the 40s. When we got there, it got a lot hotter in the staircase. But we knew the building, and we decided when we reached the 44th floor to switch staircases, and we did. And the staircase we got into was a lot cooler, which was better for us. We continued our way down, and when we reached the floors of the 30s, we began to encounter people moving the opposite way, walking up. These were most notably firefighters and buildings operations people. All of them true heroes, sacrificed their lives trying to go up and see if they could rescue people and put out the fire. It's one of the distinct memories I have of the heroism of those people moving upward as we were going down. We went further down, and as we reached the 21st floor, we were asked to leave the staircase and go onto the floor. They were moving equipment upward. The police said it would be a short time. We went onto the floor, and while we were on that floor, just a minute or two, the building violently shook again. I wasn't near a window and I didn't see it, but what I found out later was that was the collapse of the other tower, the south tower, coming down. Shortly after that, we were allowed to re-enter the staircase, and we were continuing our movement down. When we reached the 10th floor, when everything stopped, I was tuned out and I didn't hear it, but my buddies had heard on the firefighters' radio in the staircase that Tower 2 was down. So they began to panic and yell down because we were stopped and they wanted us to move. Shortly after that, we did begin moving, and we went down the rest of the stairs. There was more water and debris in the staircase, but we got to the lobby of the building and we exited the building at 10:15, about an hour and a half after the plane had struck. But even though we were out, we were not safe yet because nobody was outside the building. The other tower was down, and the expectation was that ours would be next. So we moved northward, and we met our first person at the first corner, and he told us to hustle northward, which we were doing. A couple minutes later, the ground started to shake, almost like an earthquake, and we look up, and this giant cloud is approaching at us, not knowing what was in it. We began to run. We carried John into a nearby school, and it got dark and very dark, and then pitched up black outside. And as we were looking through a window through the school door, and all that was the collapse of our tower that we had just exited, One World Trade Center. And it was a few minutes, about 20 minutes later, when we finally exited the school. And when we were outside, we determined that, and medical people, that John needed to go to the hospital to be checked. So I accompanied him to the hospital, and John checked that okay at the hospital, except that there was triage going on, medical triage, and we had to wait it out. And then by 7 p.m. that evening, they informed us that Manhattan had locked down for incoming and exiting vehicles, so would have to spend the night in the hospital. So John and I spent the night in the hospital, and it wasn't until the next day, September 12th, that Manhattan reopened and John was able to get a ambulance to take him back home to Queens, New York, and I was able to return home to New Jersey. So that kind of ended our saga of 2 days at World Trade Center. My commitment now as a survivor is to the remembrance of all those who died at the World Trade Center on September 11th of 2001. Their families and their friends, for them, their loss is for a forever time. So I thank you for remembering those victims of September 11th also.
Stay with us. On the other side of this break, my interview with Peter Bitwinski about why he returns to Ground Zero often and his message for all of us 23 years later.